everybody. My name's Cristiane. I'm an exercise therapist with Simply Health Solutions. And today, as part of my Balance 101 program, we're going to be talking about the base of support. It's something we in rehab talk a lot about, but we don't, sometimes we have a hard time kind of explaining it to our patients. We kind of have it in the back of our heads, but we don't actually discuss it very well with our clients and our patients. So I figured it would be a good thing to kind of discuss. So a lot of seniors are very, very nervous about having a fall. I used to be a falls prevention coordinator in long-term care. And even now, the biggest reason for referrals that I get now in home health is that the person has been having frequent falls. And whether or not that leads to like injury. So a lot of people get really scared that every fall is going to lead to a fracture. That's not necessarily the case, but it's still, right, it's still something we do worry about. However, there are various exercises that can actually be really, really helpful. And challenging our base of support is a really, really great starting point. So you can get really fancy. There's tons of really great balance exercises out there. I really like starting with just challenging the base of support and then kind of go from there. So for today, I'm going to be talking about what is the balance of or base of support, how does it help, and kind of some things that we take into consideration, a few introductory exercises, and some balance training equipment that maybe you want to try and take a look at. As always, with any sort of new exercise program, do make sure you do discuss exercises with like your doctor, nurse practitioner, exercise therapist, physio, right? You do want to make sure that you're medically cleared before starting any sort of new exercise program. So when it comes to your base of support, it's basically anybody who is an expert in biomechanics or physics. I'm trying really hard to whittle it down. The base of support is basically just the area under ourselves. So it includes all points of contact with the floor, and that can include our feet, our hands, walking aids. It can include a bunch of different things depending on kind of what is going on and what kind of movement the person is involved in. Walking aids, so things like canes, walkers, walking poles, provides a bigger base of support. So just kind of a bigger area that we are covering for support. And the thing is, why base of support is important is because of its relationship with what we call the center of gravity. Again, I was trying to figure out a simple way of discussing a center of gravity. And basically, I thought of it's kind of the balancing point. I thought of, when you have kids playing with that balance bird where they put just the beak on that toy, they put just the beak on their finger, and the whole bird balances on their finger. But there's really just that one point of contact. And it's basically because that point is around that center of gravity. It's around that balancing point. And so the important thing is this idea of making sure that those two kind of ideas, the base of support and the center of gravity, are kind of within each other. And usually our center of gravity is between our 2 feet, but that's not always the case, as I'm going to discuss further. So the base of support, the further our center of gravity is from our base of support, the worse our balance becomes. So even in a pretty standard balance test that we use, known as the Berg score, one of the things we will test people on is, can you stand on your 2 feet and how far forward can you reach? So some people, they can't really go very far before their bodies start compensating and they kind of bend at the hip, and now they're, instead of going forward, they're kind of going down, which I see quite often. So it's just that idea of how off center can you be before you start losing your balance. And while practice can help, we must consider both factors when maintaining good balance. So obviously people who are, great dancers, gymnasts, Cirque du Soleil, they do all sorts of crazy things that maybe the average person might not be able to do. And so what I kind of did with these pictures is just taking a look at that base of support, so that white line at the bottom versus kind of their general center of gravity and kind of where that balance point is. And you see that in every single one of these pictures, while base of support might look different, center of gravity might be kind of in a different, slightly different place, the center of gravity is always within the base of support. Again, there is a possibility of it being a little bit further, but you can only get so far or you end up falling down. And so even in this picture, you can kind of see that the base of support is kind of here versus their center of gravity is kind of way over here, which is what is causing the fall or the potential fall in this case. So we do want to just kind of keep that in mind, is that when we are walking around, when we are exercising, we do want to try to keep center of gravity somewhat within that base of support. And as we get better, we can actually challenge that a little bit more. And again, roughly only to a certain extent, unless you are doing very fancy gymnastics. So a couple of introductory exercises that I wanted to talk about is when we're designing balance programs, there's usually a couple of different categories that we think about. And these were kind of the four categories that I usually think about, which is stationary exercises, which are exercises where you're not really moving. You're kind of just staying in one position. But for a lot of people, just doing stationary exercises is actually really challenging. And then there's weight transfers, which just means that instead of it being on both on 2 feet or maybe just 1 foot, now we're kind of shifting. So kind of moving a little bit. The other thing that is really, really helpful when it comes to balance training is adding a little bit of a kind of cognitive task while doing some sort of balance activity. So what happens with some people is, yes, they have great balance as long as they're standing still and not thinking about anything else. But if we think about walking down the street, right? Now we're not just focusing on balance, but we're also paying attention to the people next to us. Maybe we're watching the sidewalk. We're counting down how much time we have left before we can cross, before we make it to the end of the intersection. Maybe we're chatting with somebody, we've run into somebody, or even something like staying balanced while riding the subway. That was something that I used to do all the time, where you would stand in the subway, and then as it's kind of bouncing out a little bit or making its quick turns, I would just kind of see if I could actually maintain my balance while not holding on. And then there's going to be sensory challenges, which is this idea of we don't realize how much we use our vision for our balance. So reducing our vision, our visual input, or distracting our visual input can again be actually really surprisingly hard. Proceed with caution. So any sort of balance exercise, you always want to make sure you're staying safe. Usually I usually have the person have a chair right behind them, counter nearby. The extra thing is, if you're going to have a chair behind you, make sure it's right up against a wall. Because sometimes people, they go either get up or sit down on a chair, and then the chair starts sliding away from them. Especially if you've got like tile floor, the chair could kind of slide away from you. So I always like putting it right up against a wall. Ensure somebody else is home, right? Because you never know, something could happen. So make sure somebody else is home, or even like a neighbor, right? Just let your neighbor know. When we do our balance, at my workplace, when we do balance programs virtually, we'll tell people, if you're home alone, leave the door unlocked, so that if something happens, we can call somebody and at least they don't have to break down your door. So again, kind of just some safety things to consider. And make sure you're feeling well before proceeding. I know depending on if you're going through a certain medical issue right now, if you've got some heart issues, um, Parkinson's, stroke, anything like that, right? You just want to make sure that you're feeling okay before proceeding, because sometimes we're so we so want to exercise that we're like, it's okay, I'm feeling kind of dizzy, but it's okay, I'm feeling nauseous or whatever. So again, just kind of check in with yourself, see how you're feeling before proceeding. So the first one, literally just standing by a counter, by a chair, feet together. And again, you'd be surprised. Some people, even this is actually really, really challenging. So it just really depends on your starting point. And then from there, we have what is called a tandem stance. So we'll have, there is like feet together. Then there's what we call semi-tandem, which is one foot is slightly in front of the other. And then we have tandem, which is one directly in front of the other. So taking a look at that and just seeing, can you maintain your balance while having those feet forward? Again, can be surprisingly challenging. And then just keep in mind, like, is your body starting to kind of bend forward? Is it starting to go to the side? Is it leaning? We often have uh, a preferred side. So again, just making sure that we are staying balanced. And some swaying in the feet is perfectly normal. Some swaying in the core, perfectly normal. That's just your body kind of taking turns with the muscles in your body. So it's so that you don't have like a few muscles just staying contracted the entire time. Like one will relax, one will stay contracted, and then they kind of twist, they kind of take turns, and that's where you get that slight swaying, which is fine. You just want to make sure it's not, complete swaying. And then we have single leg standing. Again, depending on, maybe you've got a stronger side. So maybe if you've had hip or knee replacement, if you've had a stroke or any sort of injury, right? A lot of times what happens is, if we've injured ourselves even a long time ago, like several years ago, your body might still remember that that side hurt at some point. So it might have actually changed your walking pattern to favor one side over the other. So even people who have, you know, no history of injuries in the last 5 years, they might still be favoring one side over the other. So this is where something like this can actually be really helpful to kind of see, is one leg significantly stronger than the other? Because when it comes to walking, you are basically putting all your weight on one leg and then all your weight on the other leg. And so if one leg is significantly stronger than the other, it really does tend to offset our balance. Once you're kind of doing really well with those three, another thing you can try is like clock drills, where basically you're just standing tall, right? And you're just taking your toes and pointing forward, to the side, back. Us in our balance program, we actually get really creative. And so even like we'll take this leg and you have to like cross forward or cross behind you. So again, you can make this kind of as fun as you want. So something like that is, now we're getting into a little bit more of a dynamic, right? So instead of just standing still, we are uh moving a little bit. So getting a little bit more into just our natural way of movement, right? We want to make sure that we are being able to move in a nice balanced way. The next is a lateral lunge, where basically we're just, you have your feet together, you take a step to the side, and then you lean a little bit on that side, and then you come back, and then the other side, and you come back. So it's just, again, putting weight on one side and then the other, because that is how we generally balance. I forget the exact statistic, but when it comes to walking, I think we spend about, I think it's 60% of our walking time on just one leg. And, it's all the weight on the one leg. There's that one moment where we've got weight on both legs, and then it's the other one, right? So there is that importance of making sure both legs are staying nice and strong. This is actually one of my favorite exercises for balance, because it's dynamic, it's strength, it's moving. We're moving our center of gravity, we're changing our base of support. It just does so many different things all at once. So this is one of my favorites, is what are called the lunge clocks, where it's just, yep, you're taking a step forward and back, diagonal and back, right? So, I'll say, you know, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6, 9. When we're getting really fancy with it, we'll actually say which leg to move in which direction, and the person kind of has to figure out, okay, well, which direction am I going in? So it can actually be like really fun, even in like a group exercise kind of way. And you can challenge yourself as much as you want. You can take a small step forward, you can take a bigger step forward, you can go really far down, or you can not come very far down, and you just customize it to however you feel comfortable doing. So even in a balance class, maybe I have one person who can bring that one knee all the way down to the ground and back up, versus maybe somebody else, not that strong, only brings their knee down a little bit. The other reason I really, really do like lunges is because if you ever fall to the ground, one strategy you might use to get back up is basically get to a chair or a counter. And now you will basically be doing a lunge, right? So bringing yourself back up on basically that one leg. So I actually often encourage people, to work your way up to be able to bring that knee down to the ground. And, you slowly work your way down. Don't ever try to do that. If this is new to you, don't try to do it on your own. Make sure somebody else is home, because I'd hate for you to get down to the ground and now you're stuck and now you can't get back up. So, again, safety first. If you want to get really fancy, getting into kind of a warrior pose, this is challenging that base of support, right? So this person went from 2 feet, nice wide base of support, and now on a single leg, and really trying to balance that, the two different sides. Because like I said, with the center of gravity, it's that balance point. So whenever you see somebody doing these types of movements, you often notice that legs kind of maybe go in one direction, arms go in a different direction, or maybe the two arms, two legs. Either way, you'll notice that the body starts creating like a countermeasure. So she's got her torso and her arms on one side, but then her leg is on the other side. So because then it creates that nice counterbalance. Then we've got, so kind of adding a little bit of that cognitive challenge, right? So tennis ball toss. You can have two people, right? Kind of tossing ball to each other, right up against a wall, maybe getting a little bit fancy, right? So nice and high, maybe to the side, trying to switch hands, right? Maybe try to juggle, even with the one ball, try to juggle. The idea is you're trying to maintain your balance while doing something else. So keeping your brain busy. And that can actually be quite challenging for a lot of people. When you're really focused on your balance, fine. But the second your brain starts going somewhere else, that's maybe where you're having that balance challenge. So you want to make sure that you are feeling comfortable to have that kind of mental stimulation. And you can do tons of different things. Doesn't have to be a tennis ball. Sometimes we'll even do something where we'll put something on the wall, like a random article, just anything, big print, small print, and the person just has to stand there, do their balance exercise, so whatever it is they're doing, but try to read what they're seeing on the board, because now it's a different challenge. Another thing you can try is ball rolling, so nice and tall and moving that ball forwards and back. This one's especially challenging because yes, you technically, in a sense, have 2 feet are kind of stable, but not really. Where you're putting all your weight on the one leg, and now the other one's actually out and moving. So similar to that idea of that dynamic, and you are thinking about it because you don't want to go too far, too close. You're actually trying to like gauge how far. You can go side to side. You can do a circle, whatever feels comfortable. But it's just that idea of challenging your balance in with some dynamic movement. And then this is that sensory um, portion that I was talking about, where maybe doing some of these exercises, but now with your eyes closed. You'd be very, very surprised how much we use our eyes for balance. One thing that I've actually noticed when it comes to vision is if I'm sitting in my chair that turns, if I just sit here, with my legs crossed so my feet aren't on the floor, and I sit here and I close my eyes, I can feel the chair. It feels like the chair is turning in one direction. I open my eyes, I have not moved. And it's a very, for me, it's a very weird feeling because my body feels like I'm moving, but I'm actually not. So again, we don't realize how much our vision impacts our balance until maybe we're not really paying attention, or maybe we're starting to lose our vision. So it is kind of important. Or the other thing that often comes up is if you need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, right? Where you don't want to turn on all the lights and kind of wake yourself up. You're kind of trying to stay in that kind of sleepy state while you go to the bathroom. But now that means there's less visual information. So maybe you're kind of what we call furniture walking or wall walking. You're kind of feeling around. So again, those are the moments when we start realizing, oh, like our eyes are actually really important. And then when it comes to balance training equipment, you don't even have to get anything too expensive. There are usually different versions of a lot of these things. Maybe some of these things you already even have at home. Probably the one thing you don't have is what is called a Bosu ball. But this is actually pretty intense. Depending on maybe if you go to a gym, they might have one. So it really depends. Most rehab places have one. Um, but it's just that idea of like standing on this half inflated ball, just trying to maintain your balance. One thing I always like to talk about is I have a coworker who runs a Parkinson's program, and it is wild the things that these clients who have early stage Parkinson's, but it's wild to see the things that they're able to do. And one thing she does is she takes a bunch of these Bosu balls, lines them all up, and people literally walk across them. And so I just find it amazing because even I struggle to do that because I've had a lot of ankle injuries as a kid. So even I struggle with my balance to be able to do that. Another thing is just standing on something unstable. So that could be a pillow, that could be some foam that you can get pretty much anywhere. It does not have to be something expensive. Again, like I said, you could be like a pillow. If you've got like a throw pillow on your couch, you can try using that. It's just that idea of something that's not absolutely stable, where your feet have to kind of play around with it, and they kind of have to take turns and kind of be off balance for a little bit. You'd be really surprised. It's actually really, really helpful. Another thing you can do, maybe get an exercise ball, where you're kind of sitting on that ball and then just try to maintain your core balance, right? Sitting up nice and tall, and then maybe lifting one feet, and then the other one. And again, uh, it's been a while since I've bought one of these, but you can usually get them at like Canadian Tire, Winners. Doesn't have to be something ultra expensive. Um, and again, just kind of an interesting way of challenging your balance. And then lastly, there's this idea of cone taps. So you can do this either with your hands or with your feet. So you got options there. But it's just basically where you stand on one leg, and then either with your hand or your foot, you're kind of reaching down to the different sides. So it's a little bit different than the lunge clocks, because the lunge clocks, you're putting all your weight on that one leg. And then, but yes, you're kind of moving your center of your base of support, but now you're putting weight on that leg. And so now you got 2 feet on the ground and you're kind of shifting your weight from side to side. This one, you're moving either your arm or your leg, but that is not a solid point. So again, it's just that challenge, because even in this person, technically their center of balance might even be outside of their body, which is fine. That is a thing. But it's just that idea of now their center of gravity is not where it usually is. So it really does tend to like mess with the brain, but again, can be really, really helpful, because when it comes to life and balancing, it is not there's just so many things that could happen, right? So when you're out walking about, walking on the subway, getting into a bus, walking on the sidewalk, if you're going down to like maybe the beach now that things are getting warmer, if you're walking along a pool deck where you have like that kind of slippery surface, right? There's all these different things that our bodies have to kind of adjust to. But if we're kind of um, trying to stay just on solid ground, like in our rooms, in maybe like shopping malls, and not really challenging our balance over time will start getting worse because we're not practicing. And it really is that kind of use it or lose it mentality. So the whole point of all of these different exercises is not to be a very prescriptive type of thing where yes, you'll do 10 of these and 10 of these, but it's just to kind of see and give you ideas about what are some things that I had difficulty with, what are some things that I found really easy, and then working a little bit more on the things that were challenging, and then trying to rebuild your balance from there. And as I always say, like with practice, you'd be so surprised what you can achieve. I have worked with people with so many different medical conditions, and I often get asked, if I do a certain number of exercises a certain number of times, will I get better? How quickly will I get better? And I often say like it really depends. It's going to be a person case by case basis, but the side effects of not exercising are definitely going to be worse than the side effects of exercising. Even exercising, especially with balance, there's always going to be risks. You always have to be careful, minimize your risks. But again, the risks of exercising are going to be way less than the risks of not exercising. And I was just doing a quick little search about kind of just like world records and stuff. And something I happen to have found is there's this kind of world marathon competition. I'm not in this space, so I don't know too much about it. But apparently there was a world record set in the 80 plus category, and I think this was the female category. But anyway, in the 80 plus category, and this person ran a marathon in 4.5 hours in her 80s. So I often say, I can barely run for 20 minutes. So, like that's fantastic. And I think that is so cool when we see people out there and just, doing their best. Again, these people in this Parkinson's program, they got better balance than I do. Sometimes it's kind of embarrassing because I'm like showing exercises and like I'm struggling, and everybody there, like they're practicing. We practice getting down to the ground and back up. We have a balance, like a balance beam on the floor, and people walk across that. We have things where like you kind of have to like hop over, you know, toe taps, climbing stairs, coming back down. Again, there's so many different things that you can do to challenge your balance. It's just about finding that nice kind of middle ground of like you want to challenge yourself enough that you are getting an exercise, but not so much that you're putting yourself at risk of getting an injury. So, and that's where, maybe talking to somebody can be really helpful. If you ever do want to book an appointment, feel free to contact me. We can always discuss your concerns, and maybe we can talk about different ideas that you can look into. And then if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I do post most of my slides on my website, and I do post my recordings on my YouTube channel. And as of recently, I've actually started posting more videos about just different research articles. I've got a couple of plans on creating um, videos about very specific exercises, research articles, and just to kind of give you that encouragement to be able to go out and exercise and be active at any stage of your life, because I think exercising is important in any stage of life, in any health condition. It's just a matter of how much and what it's going to look like. Everybody's exercises are going to look a little bit different, but it's still going to be good to go out and keep your body moving.